This video will give you a brief review of how to answer a CER or short answer question. So just as a reminder, CER is the protocol that we use for body paragraphs in a longer essay, but it's also the same protocol that we use for a short answer, because essentially a short answer is like a miniature version of a body paragraph. So I'm going to go through and review the steps so that you know what you need to do in order to answer these questions. So where do you begin? So the first thing that you need to do to begin is to familiarize yourself with the prompt. And the prompt is another word for the question. So you need to go back and you need to reread the prompt to make sure that you understand the gist or general idea of the prompt. After you have a general idea of what the prompt is asking you to do or to find or to look for, you need to read it again, and when you do it this time, you need to complete the do what protocol with the prompt. So as a reminder, the do what protocol is a protocol that we use before we begin reading and before we begin answering a short answer or an essay. And it requires us to go through the prompt and to find those do words. And those do words are our verbs. And we're going to go through and we're going to circle those. And then after each verb, we're going to ask ourselves the question, what? So if it's asking us to write, what are we writing? If it's asking us to answer, what are we answering? If it's asking us to find, what are we finding? And we're going to underline what it's asking us to find. And then finally, we're going to go back through and we're going to review that. And we're going to look and we're going to say, okay, what is it exactly that I have to do? And then where am I going to find that information? So you do that before you begin answering your questions. And if you're unfamiliar with the do what protocol, there is an anchor chart at the front of the classroom to help direct you. Next, you're ready to begin answering your question. And what you do next depends on whether or not you know the answer to the question. If you're confident that you know the answer to the question and that you are able to answer it fully and locate evidence and you really are confident, then the next step for you is to do the TTQA strategy and write your claim. So as a reminder, the TTQA strategy is you take the question and you turn the question around. You turn it into a claim statement. So again, there is an anchor chart at the front of the class that directs you how to do this, but essentially what you do is you need to find the question word or phrase. So who, what, when, where, why is our question words. And very often you'll hear question phrases. So why does, how does. If you see those phrases, you're going to basically cross them off and you're going to start your claim or your first sentence of your CER by using everything to the right of the question word through the mark of punctuation. You're going to add the word because, and then you're going to give your reasons, just like we would for a thesis statement. If you do not know the answer to the question, then you're going to have to return to your notes that you took in the margin of your reading. Hopefully you took good notes because now is where it helps you. Or you're going to have to reread the section in the text. Very often in a short answer question, they will tell you what paragraph they're talking about and they'll direct you to a particular part of the story. But you may need to reread part of the text in order to find your answer. And then, just as you would if you knew the answer, you're going to use the TTQA strategy to answer that and write your claim. After you have your claim, you need to move on to your evidence. You're going to start your evidence portion of your CER response by letting the reader know that the evidence is coming. You have to cue them in that evidence is coming so that they don't get lost. They know what you're about to do. And in order to do this, just like we did when we write argument papers or literary analysis or anything else, we're going to use an evidence stem to introduce our evidence, to let our reader know what is about to come, to help our reader out. And our evidence stems, again, are on an anchor chart in the front of the classroom. So you can use any of those that make sense for you. Next, you're going to return to the story and you're going to lift a line. You're going to find one line of the text that supports whatever your claim is or that proves whatever your claim is. And you're going to write it word for word. Don't forget to punctuate your evidence properly. If the words don't belong to you, please make sure they're in quotation marks. Please make sure there's a comma or the word that separating your evidence stem from your quotation. Finally, you must explain your evidence, and very often this can be the hardest step. I know for me it takes the most time to really think about how does that evidence prove that claim. The last step is really where you tie it all together. So you should use one of the explanation sentence stems. And again, those are on an anchor chart in front of the classroom. So everything that you need is on an anchor chart in this classroom, step by step, as we do CERs. So those evidence stems, or excuse me, those explanation stems might be like, this proves, this explains, this shows that. And you're going to use those explanation stems to explain how your line of evidence proves or supports your claim. Do not simply restate or rephrase the evidence. The reader knows what the evidence says. It is your job to do some original thinking to explain how that piece of evidence is the best piece of evidence to prove your claim. And that may take 1 or 2 sentences. The last step before you finish is to return to the do what strategy notes that you took at the beginning. Did you do what you were asked to do? Did you forget something? If so, return to your response and correct it and add to it. If you did everything the prompt asks, then reread your response and make sure that it makes sense. Look for any grammar or punctuation errors, especially with your evidence, and make any necessary corrections. When you've done that, you're ready to move on.